Right then guys, welcome back to Line Bites. Yeah, on today's episode, it's a request that I've had from a few people. What we're going to be looking at is how to keep yourself warm and motivated on the bank during the cold months. So from the 21st of December, we're officially into winter. Now, the weather leading up to the 21st this year has been anything but autumnal. It's definitely felt more like we've been in winter straight away. But we'll be officially in winter. So what I wanted to cover off basically were some things that, being in the military, being in the army, and having been deployed to various miserably cold places where we've been working in up to kind of like minus 30 degrees temperatures, things like that, where it's just horrendous if you don't admin stuff properly. Some of those things translate pretty well over to the world of carp fishing and keeping yourself warm on the bank. Now, for a lot of people, when it kind of gets to the end of summer, moving into autumn, kind of October time, that's when they pack the rods away for carp and either start taking up the pike and the perch or whatever they do in the winter, or alternatively you just don't touch the rods until the following spring, which is more than fair enough. But I mean, what if I told you that there's some things that are quite inexpensive and don't cost the world that you could do, which will help you enjoy getting out on the bank, even if it's just for a day at a time. We're going to be looking at night fishing as well, but I mean, this is equally as applicable to just short day sessions as well. So I hope you find this helpful. Something that I've learned over the last 5-6 years, and it definitely helps me with my winter fishing. If you enjoy this channel, then please have a look through my other videos. Remember to like and subscribe, and then hit that notification button like it was one of your rods ripping off. So without further ado, what we're going to do, if I stop dying, we start looking through my top tips for winter. Right, so I've got them all written down here on my phone just to act as a prompt, so if you see me looking down at my phone, that is what I'm doing. So the first one, right, we want to keep hot. What we're going to look at now is personal administration. So the first one, once you're on the bank and you're set up, is to drink. Alright, so whenever I'm on the bank, particularly in winter, I will have a steady stream of brews going through me, just to help keep me warm and to keep me active. Gets my hands doing things and just allows me to remain on top of things. Tea and coffee are diuretics, right? So if you drink enough of them, you'll end up feeling pretty dehydrated and hungover. You'll wake up the next morning after the night before feeling like you'd had 10 scoops, and you'll be in your bivvy on your own, and yeah, won't have that comfort of being able to go and get a full English from your kitchen. So the next one on top of that is to make sure you drink plenty of water. Now, it's not for everyone drinking freezing cold water when you're on the bank in freezing cold conditions. So a way of getting around that is to take some juice with you and just simply heat that juice up in a kettle, or alternatively take decaf teas, decaf coffees. You'll still get the benefits of the warmth from those drinks, and also a bit of an energy kick, but you won't get that same dehydration that you would with just drinking pure tea and coffee. So that would be my first tip. Whenever I'm out in the cold, alright, with work, I always make sure I've got a hot flask with a brew in it. That just means whenever we stop, alright, I can take some on, whether that's tea, coffee, or just a cordial that I've warmed up. It does the same job. We burn a lot more energy on the bank during winter than you'd probably give yourself credit for, and that's mainly down to the fact that your body's trying to keep your core temperature up. Big way of helping you with this is to eat regularly. Alright, so whenever I'm on the bank in winter, I mean, I'm pretty fat anyway, so this is throughout the year, I will snack constantly, and that just helps keep my energy levels up. When it comes to main meal times, so lunch and dinner, I'll always make sure that I have proper meals with me. I don't really like cooking from scratch in winter. I don't mind it in summer, but winter I find it a bit of a nose. So top tip that I do to make sure I'm eating hearty, healthy and filling meals, I tend to buy ready meals from the Co-op or Sainsbury's or Tesco's, wherever I go. So chili con carnes are great, so are the curries. You can even get bangers and mash with gravy and stick that in your Ridge Monkey. Works a treat. Last night I had Hunter's chicken with paprika potatoes, and just that hot food inside you just keeps everything firing and keeps you going. When it comes to breakfast, right, what I tend to do is, regardless of what I eat afterwards, I always start the day with a porridge. Now, porridge full of carbs, alright, slow burning energy, and it'll fill you up, it'll just keep you going. After that, might have a bacon sandwich, egg sandwich, but to start with, I always carry porridge. That's even if I'm just on a day session. The next one, so this is a bit of an interesting one, and what we're going to look at is layering up and appropriate clothing. Now, not everyone watching this will want to be out buying the latest thermal suits from VAS or Tracker or whoever it might be, because they get pretty expensive, and to be quite honest, like they're not something that you necessarily need in order to be able to fish at winter. It's nice to have if you can afford it, but granted, not everyone can. So what we're going to talk about is layering up. One of the quickest ways for you to get cold and to not enjoy your session in the winter is by getting a sweat on. Now, by getting a sweat on, we're automatically putting moisture onto our bodies, which will cool down after a while and then eventually cool ourselves down. So the big one is to layer up. Now, it's better to put more layers on as you go in order to heat up than have to take layers off. Alright, to this end, what we want to do is tailor our clothing to what we're doing. So, for example, it might be cold when we get out of our car, but it doesn't mean you should necessarily put every single bit of warm kit you own on at that point. You've got to remember that next you'll be pushing around the barrier to try and find a swim, alright, and if you've got all that warm kit on, you're going to build up a sweat, alright, and that's going to sweat through to your socks, and most importantly your base layer, which is one of the most important pieces of kit for keeping your body temperature warm, right? So when I tend to get to the bank on a wind session, what I will walk around in is just a set of trousers and maybe a jumper, depending on the wind's chill, right? I may have my waft windbreaker on, which is just here, which is an awesome piece of kit, alright? So I'm not going to heat up too much, alright? It's pretty lightweight, but all it's going to do is it's going to take the bite out of that wind, so I don't feel it as much. Also means I'm not going to sweat, which is an absolute world changer. Next thing I'll do, alright, once I'm in the swim and I'm sorted out, I won't start putting more and more layers on until I've got all my kit sorted out. Quite often I won't even have a base layer on at this point. I'll just have a decent pair of windbreaker trousers and either the waft windbreaker or just the jumper like you can see under here at the moment. That's because once you're setting up and moving into your swim and things like that, you're still getting that sweat on and you don't want to start getting wet. Once I've got everything set up, at that point I will then start adding layers. So generally speaking at this point, this is when I will get into the bivvy and I'll start putting on my cold weather specific kit. Base layers, alright, so good thermal layer, a top and a bottom, and then up until now I'll have just been wearing normal woolen socks. I won't be wearing anything that's designed for the cold weather. Once I'm in the swim and I know I'm not going to be moving for a good set of time, I will put on my cold weather socks. Now, being in the army, I'm quite lucky that I have this issued extreme cold weather socks, which are absolutely awesome for this time of year. They keep your feet warm, but they're not something that you want to be walking around in overly because your feet start to sweat and at that point they get cold. And one of the biggest things is we want to keep our extremities, such as our toes and our feet, fingers warm throughout winter. So only once I know I'm not going to be moving around too much, I start to build those layers up. Once I'm settled and I've got a base layer on, if I feel the need to, I'll put on this Fortis Sherpa fleece, which I absolutely love. It's great for just keeping you warm and trapping that air in between your layers. And then from there, if it's raining, I'll put on my waft jacket and things like that. Quite often what you'll find me is in my waders, right, just with a base layer on underneath, so some thermal like long johns, and then on top you'll see what I've got on now, and I find that that generally does me well for all of my fishing throughout winter. Anyone else watch my brew just disappear then? That's great. Socks. So socks are a massive one and something that people can get very wrong at times. As with the rest of our warm kit, we get out the car and it can be a massive temptation just to throw it all on straight away. But like I said in that last bit, you've got to remember you could be walking up to maybe a K and a half, 2K in warm kit, carrying a shed load of gear on your barrow, and that's going to build up a sweat, and that also applies to your feet. Now, getting some good woolen socks is an absolute must, and if you can get on eBay and find some of the extreme cold weather socks from the army or get to an army surplus, then they are great and they are cheap as well. But another set of socks that people tend to use, and we use them in the army as well, are sealskins. So sealskins are a waterproof sock. They're like a neoprene, and they repel water. Likewise, little tip for you here, if you get wet feet, right, wet socks, putting your sealskins over the top and then getting into your sleeping bag can actually will actually dry the socks off inside and make them a bit more bearable if you haven't bought spares, which is another thing. You need to make sure you've got spares for all of this during the winter, particularly your base layers. So sealskins, I would only ever put those on once I knew I was going to be stationary, due to that neoprene fabric that they use to help repel the water and also to help draw moisture out. Your feet will get very sweaty in them very, very quickly. So walking around and doing laps and laps and laps around the lake isn't what you want to be using them for. You want to be using them once you're stationary. You know you're not going to be moving, and you're not going to be going far. Very good set of kit, but need to be used right. Otherwise, they can end up making your life a lot worse than it needs to be. When it comes to our clothing, what we want to make sure is that it's not absolutely skin tight. Your base layers need to be skin tight, right? That will help keep some of that heat in. But the way that layering clothes works, particularly in, say for example, sleeping bags and things like that, is that hot air gets trapped in little pockets between the layers of clothes, and that's what actually helps keep you warm. So if you're wearing absolutely skin tight clothing throughout the course of your session, you're going to get colder a lot quicker, and you're not going to feel the benefits that these otherwise greatly designed pieces of clothing would offer you. So top tip for that is, apart from your base layer, anything else that you're going to be wearing over the top, I would always go a layer or a size bigger than you'd normally get, just to add for that extra bit of movement, for that air to get trapped in those pockets and to keep you nice and warm. I'm going to start looking inside the bivvy and in our sleeping system and things that we can do to keep warm there. So the first thing that I always take with me wherever I'm fishing, alright, no matter what time of year it is, unless it's midsummer, are these. So I was lucky enough to have these issued on a deployment, and they're actually made by Snugpack, and they're called a softy booty, and essentially it's like having a puffer jacket but on your feet. They've got a little bungee cord here that you can move up and down so that they can attach to your feet, and there's also a waterproof padded layer on the bottom, meaning that should you need to get up in the night, whether it's to hit a rod or to go and answer nature's call, you're able to do so relatively quickly without them getting the base of your feet wet. Other brands do them, so I know Nash do a nice tent, things like that. These are about £35, and they're never out of my sleeping bag. Wherever I am, whatever time of year it is, they're in my sleeping bag, so I know that they're good to go. Next bit of warm kit that we can use, alright, mittens. Now, obviously, I don't have mittens on me at the moment, but that's because it's a really mild day, and as I said, I will layer my clothing accordingly to what the temperature's doing. So, Tracker do a great pair, which you can see on the inset here, Alan using at Drayton, alright, and mittens are great. Not only are they waterproof and keep your fingers warm, but you can then lift the flap up, and when you need to start making solid bags, doing things with your rig, setting bobbins on your rods, things like that, you can get those off quickly, do what you need to do, get them back on, and your fingers are nice and warm again. Final one is headwear. Now, same again, it's mild today, we're in a real mild spell considering it's mid-December, but headwear is massively important. Make sure you've got a woolly hat with you, as we lose most heat through our extremities. That made no sense. We lose most heat through our head, and it's one of the quickest ways that the cold will get to you. As you can see, cold is clearly getting to me. Moving on from that kit that we would keep inside the bivvy, the next thing that I have with me at all times is a hot water bottle. So this is one that I have stolen from my girlfriend, and I take it absolutely everywhere with me. Now this goes inside the sleeping bag, and this will keep me warm for a good 3 or 4 hours, and if I need to, alright, and that heat starts to dissipate once the hot water bottle's cooled down, then it only takes a few minutes for me to heat that back up, get it back in, and be nice and toasty again. So an absolutely critical piece of kit. A lot of people like to use bivvy heaters and gas stoves and things like that. Now I would recommend against that, but we'll come on to those shortly because I want to do things in a logical process. So next thing that we're going to look at, alright, is how to keep ourselves warm once we're inside the bivvy. Now, we'll start from ground up and work our way to the top of the bivvy. So the first thing that is critically important when winter fishing is to have a ground sheet. Now, if your bivvy doesn't come with a ground sheet, I know some of them you have to buy extra, say for example like the Nash Titan hide and things like that. You can buy tarp from B&Q, places like that, cut it to the shape or the footprint of your bivvy, and then use that as a ground sheet. Nice cheap alternative method for you there. Now the reason the ground sheet is so important, right, obviously at night the earth starts to cool down and the ground temperature obviously cools down as well. This cold air then comes up and just sits at ground level, which is directly underneath your bed chair, and creates a nice cool spot. By having a ground sheet, alright, that helps deflect some of that cold air coming up from the ground and the ground temperature cooling. Alright, it just keeps things a little bit warmer inside your bivvy. Next we're going to look at the bed chair. So at the moment I'm using an Aqua Atom bed chair with the Aqua Atom sleep system that comes with it, alright? It's only a 3-season, but that's absolutely fine for me. Not everyone needs a 5-season sleeping bag. Now, I'll use this 3-season throughout every season during the year, whether it's spring, summer, autumn, winter. Little cheat tip here for what I do if you've just got a regular cheap sleep system, or you've only got a 3-season sleep system or something like that. With our sleeping bags in the army, it works on, we have a base layer sleeping bag, and then depending on the weather conditions, the temperature, we then build up with sleeping bags around that to the point where you have a massive bouncing bomb. I work on exactly the same principle with my 3-season sleeping bag. Now I actually take one of my old surplus summer sleeping bags from army issue, and I keep that in the sleep system at all times, and it stays there no matter what it is throughout the year, like whether it's summer, spring, autumn, winter. It's nice and flat that the bed chair still goes compact, right, but it just gives me that extra bit of heat that I need, particularly during the colder months. Next one we're going to look at is condensation in the bivvies. Now condensation in the bivvy is the quickest way that you're going to give yourself a miserable time, because what happens to that condensation when it's cold? Well, it rises up, forms on the top of the bivvy, and then as soon as the overall temperature in your bivvy cools down, guess what? That's going to start to freeze and turn into frost, and before you know it, the inside of your bivvy is like a fridge freezer. So big one here is avoid using your gas cookers and things like that inside the bivvy, as it creates condensation, which is just an absolute game changer, and it'll ruin your session. Likewise, you'll also think that the bivvy's got a leak when actually it doesn't. So try and avoid using naked flames and things like that heat the bivvy up rapidly, create steam and things like that within it, and you shouldn't go too far wrong. So that was a little walkthrough how I keep warm in the winter. If you're an avid angler and love fishing in winter and have some tips that I haven't mentioned here, then feel free to post them down below, because I believe that these videos are all about learning. So if you've got something that I haven't mentioned here, or you think that could help other anglers, put it in the comments box and let everyone see, share that wealth, because we're all out here on the bank trying to enjoy the same sport, so let's not keep things to ourselves. Hope you've enjoyed this very quick video. I'm still in the process of COVID, recovering from it. My chest is absolutely in bobbins, so talking is not the easiest thing for me right now, but hopefully you bear with. If you've enjoyed this video, then please remember to like and subscribe, hit that notification button. It just helps me know that you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out there, and just acts as an extra bit of motivation to get me out on the bank to continue to making these videos. Anyway, if you are out on the bank, hope the lake hasn't frozen over, and tight lines, wet nets, and I'll see you in the new year for my next session.